The quiet streets of Wrenwood were anything but comforting tonight. Fog crept lazily through the town like it had nowhere better to be. The faint orange glow of streetlights flickered, as if struggling to keep the darkness at bay. Casper Graves strutted down the cobblestone paths, hands buried in the pockets of his battered trench coat. He was clearly not a man in the mood for supernatural shenanigans, but fate, oh fate, had other plans. The faint sound of carnival music hummed through the mist, eerie and distorted. Casper froze. That sound wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Stars Hollow Fairground had been shut down years ago after a series of unexplainable accidents. Yet here he was, staring at the rusted gates that shouldn't be singing. With an audible creak, Casper pushed the gates open. The fairground greeted him like an old friend, nostalgic yet unnervingly alive. Rides stood still but not lifeless, like predators waiting for the right moment to pounce. The carousel's chipped horses gleamed in the moonlight. Then, as if taking a cue, the carousel began turning, playing a slow, haunting tune. "Seriously?" Casper muttered, gripping his ghost trap tightly. As if answering him, the Ferris wheel groaned to life next, its rusted carriages creaking ominously. Casper moved deeper into the park, ignoring the goosebumps crawling up his arms. That's when he spotted it, a shimmering crack in reality at the heart of the park. It pulsed, faint but foreboding. Before he could approach, a distorted figure emerged from the fog. No time for pleasantries. It lunged straight for him. Casper dodged, his trench coat whipping dramatically in the wind. Vic, his poltergeist sidekick, making a flashy entrance by possessing a nearby popcorn machine. The machine rattled and spat popcorn aggressively, creating just enough chaos for Casper to subdue the ghost with his containment spell. With the ghost trapped, the fairground quieted down, though the popcorn machine rattled defiantly as if Vic wasn't quite ready to let the drama end. Casper gave it a pointed look, raising an eyebrow. "You done? Or do you want to try possessing the cotton candy machine next?" The machine stilled, then erupted in a puff of steam. A faint shimmer rose from it, forming into a spectral outline that hovered near Casper's shoulder. This was Vic, a poltergeist with an overabundance of sass and a talent for unnecessary theatrics. "You know, Graves," Vic began, his voice dripping with faux dignity. "You should really appreciate my creative approach to ghost wrangling." Casper smirked. "Let's not forget, you started out as one of the ghosts I had to wrangle." Vic's form flickered, a habit of his whenever someone struck a nerve. "Oh, here we go again. Are you ever going to stop holding that against me?" Casper shook his head. "You trashed my entire office, Vic. Do you know how hard it is to get spectral goo out of furniture? That was years ago." Vic shot back, his tone defensive but playful. "And might I remind you, you're the one who decided to strike a deal instead of exercising me. Clearly, you saw potential." Casper snorted. Potential to be annoying, maybe. The banter paused for a moment, giving way to silence as Casper and Vic continued their trek through the mist-shrouded park. After a beat, Vic spoke again, his tone softer. "You know, you're not the worst human I've ever worked with." "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Casper asked, glancing sidelong at his spectral companion. "Take it or leave it," Vic replied with a ghostly shrug. "But seriously, Graves, you've given me a purpose. After decades of wreaking random havoc, I guess it's nice to feel like I'm part of something bigger. Even if that something involves chasing angry spirits through creepy fairgrounds." Casper's smirk softened into something almost like a smile. "Well, if I've got to deal with this supernatural nonsense, I guess it's nice to have someone around who's already halfway to the other side." "Touching," Vic deadpanned. "Now, let's get out of here before another Ferris wheel decides to come to life." The Wrenwood Library stood tall and foreboding, a relic of a bygone era with stone gargoyles perched ominously atop its roofline. Casper Graves paused outside the wrought iron doors, his trench coat rustling lightly in the cool night breeze. At his side, Ellie Stone adjusted the straps of her gear-filled backpack, brimming with gadgets she had designed herself. EMF scanners, ghost traps, and a handheld device she liked to call the spectral scrambler. Ellie was new to the team. She and Casper had crossed paths a few months ago during one of his ghost hunting gigs. What had started as an argument, Ellie accused Casper of being a fraud while live streaming one of his investigations, had quickly turned into an unexpected partnership. Ellie's skepticism was balanced by an undeniable brilliance when it came to ghost hunting tech, and she wasn't afraid to challenge Casper's old-school approach. After a heated debate and an even more heated escape from a particularly nasty poltergeist, Casper had begrudgingly invited Ellie to tag along on future cases. She hadn't looked back since. Ellie smirked as Casper studied the library entrance, her flashlight flicking idly over the gargoyle statues. "You sure you don't want to knock? Ghost librarians might appreciate manners." Casper didn't bother replying. He pushed the heavy doors open, and they creaked loudly, sending echoes through the cavernous interior. Ellie followed closely behind, her flashlight casting long, eerie shadows across the dusty bookshelves that lined the walls. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and mildew. Ellie's flashlight beam wavered as she stepped cautiously into the dimly lit space. Creepy basements. Check. Flickering shadows. Check. And a general sense of impending doom. Double check. Her attempt at humor only made the atmosphere more unsettling. Casper, unfazed, strode toward the central reading area. His eyes were drawn to the faint glow of runes etched into the stone walls of the basement stairwell. The symbols seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, a sensation he had learned not to question when dealing with the supernatural. Ellie crouched beside the runes, pulling out her spectral scrambler to analyze the markings. This is interesting. These runes seem like they're tethered to something deeper. Maybe a dimensional tier? Casper tilted his head, unimpressed. Great. Another tier. Just what we needed. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from above, a book crashing to the ground. Then another, and another. Within seconds, an avalanche of books tumbled from the shelves, creating a cacophony that reverberated throughout the library. Casper instinctively grabbed Ellie by the arm, pulling her out of the way as the chaos unfolded. The sound of whispers began to fill the air, soft at first, then growing louder, harsher, until they morphed into guttural growls. Ellie's flashlight flicked toward the source of the noise, illuminating the figure emerging from the shadows. It was the ghostly librarian, her decayed face twisted in fury. Ellie froze, her grip tightening around the flashlight. "Okay, definitely not a fan of visitors," she muttered nervously. Casper stepped forward, his ghost trap ready. "Stay behind me." The librarian wasted no time. She lunged at Casper and Ellie, her translucent form weaving through the air with unnerving speed. Casper dodged, his trench coat billowing dramatically, while Ellie scrambled to stay out of the line of attack. "How do we reason with her?" Ellie shouted as she ducked behind a desk. "You don't reason with angry spirits," Casper replied flatly. Vic chose that moment to make his entrance. He possessed a dusty old globe sitting atop one of the desks, spinning it wildly. "I've got this one covered, Graves." Vic's voice echoed through the library as the globe wobbled off its axis, rolling unpredictably toward the librarian. The distraction worked, temporarily. The librarian swerved, knocking the globe aside with a scream. Casper took advantage of the opening, reciting a containment spell while activating his ghost trap. The librarian's form twisted and writhed as the trap drew her in, her cries echoing until the room fell silent. Ellie leaned against a bookshelf, catching her breath. "So, That was terrifying. Is it always this intense with you? Casper smirked faintly. You get used to it. Vic's spectral shimmer floated toward them, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You're welcome, by the way. Not all ghosts have my finesse. Ellie rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the grin tugging at her lips. Right. Thanks, Vic. You really saved the day with your spinning globe technique. Casper pocketed the ghost trap and turned toward the glowing runes once more. Let's focus. These markings are connected to something bigger. The librarian was just the start. Ellie's smile faded as she studied the runes alongside Casper. Then we'd better figure it out fast. I have a feeling we're in for a long night. The runes glowed faintly on Ellie's tablet screen, their rhythmic pulsing mirrored in the soft hum of her spectral scrambler. She furrowed her brow, analyzing the cryptic markings while Casper paced behind her, his steps muffled by the worn carpet of the library floor. These symbols, Ellie began, her voice tinged with urgency. They're ancient, way older than the librarian's haunting. We're talking pre-town founding old. They're tethered to a dimensional tier. If we don't shut it down... Casper stopped pacing and turned toward her, his gaze steady. Then we're looking at chaos spilling over. I've seen this before. Vic chimed in, his spectral outline flickering lazily above the globe he still inhabited. Oh, lovely. Another apocalypse. You've got quite the knack for walking straight into disaster, Graves. Casper ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. Ellie, can you trace these runes back to their source? She nodded. They're pointing west, to the ruins of Wrenwood's old church. Casper frowned. The old church was infamous in Wrenwood for its grim history. Abandoned decades ago after a series of mysterious deaths, it now stood as a crumbling husk on the outskirts of town, shrouded in shadow and secrecy. The trio set out into the night, leaving the library behind. Ellie rode shotgun in Casper's beat-up truck, her gear piled haphazardly in the back seat. Vic, true to form, had decided to ride along by possessing the radio, playing ghostly static interspersed with snippets of old rock ballads. Ellie glanced out the window at the darkened landscape. So, this church, what's the story? Casper's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. Built in the late 1800s, used to be the heart of the town. Then, things went wrong. People started disappearing. Rumors of cult activity. It shut down and was left to rot. Creepy, Ellie replied, trying not to sound nervous. Vic chimed in from the radio. Sounds like a lovely vacation spot. Hope you booked us a suite. Casper couldn't help but smirk. You'll get your suite in the afterlife, Vic. The road grew darker and narrower as they approached the church, its silhouette looming like a specter against the night sky. Blue flames flickered faintly along the path leading to the entrance, casting eerie shadows that danced across the truck's headlights. The air grew colder as they stepped inside. The church's interior was hauntingly beautiful, a decayed altar adorned with faded carvings, crumbling pews lined with cobwebs, and stained glass windows that filtered moonlight in fragmented patterns. Ellie's flashlight caught movement. Shadows twisted unnaturally across the walls, their shapes vaguely human but distorted beyond recognition. Casper moved cautiously, his ghost trap at the ready. This place is alive, Ellie whispered, her voice barely audible. Not alive, Casper corrected. Awake. At the altar stood a figure, shrouded in shadow, its form barely human. The Grey Scribe. He clutched a glowing quill in one skeletal hand, its light casting unsettling reflections across the room. The scribe's voice echoed through the cavernous space, cold and rasping. Casper Graves. You've meddled in affairs beyond your comprehension. Casper smirked, his grip tightening on the ghost trap. Yeah, I get that a lot. Ellie stepped back instinctively as the room erupted into chaos. Ghosts spilled from the walls, their anguish cries deafening. Casper and Ellie braced themselves as Vic sprang into action, inhabiting a fallen candelabra and hurling it at the nearest ghost. The Grey Scribe raised his glowing quill, and the light grew brighter, engulfing the room. Casper shouted over the noise, his voice barely carrying. "Ellie, get that device working now." Ellie fumbled with her spectral scrambler, her hands shaking. "I'm trying. Just keep them off me." The church erupted into chaos, the ghosts swirling in a vortex around the Grey Scribe's glowing quill. Casper's boots echoed on the cold stone as he charged forward, his ghost trap glowing faintly at his side. Ellie crouched behind the crumbling pews, frantically working on her spectral scrambler. Vic, as usual, made his entrance with flair, possessing a candelabra and swinging it wildly at the nearest ghost. "You know," he called out, his voice ricocheting across the church, "I'd love to say I signed up for this, but the truth is, I'm just that bored." Casper dodged a ghostly tendril that lashed toward him like a whip, his gaze locked on the scribe. "Ellie, I could use that gadget any day now." Ellie's hand shook as she adjusted the dials on the device. "It's not exactly plug and play." "A little patience, maybe?" The scribe's laughter echoed, chilling and hollow. "Your toys cannot stop the inevitable," he sneered, the quill's light flaring brighter. "You meddle in forces beyond your understanding, mortal." "Oh, spare me the villain speech," Casper shot back, his tone dry despite the danger. Ellie's spectral scrambler suddenly whirred to life, emitting a faint, high-pitched hum. She exhaled sharply, relief flickering across her face. "Got it. Now let's see if this works." She aimed the device at the vortex of ghosts, sending out a pulse of energy. The ghosts shrieked as the pulse disrupted their forms, momentarily slowing the chaos. Casper used the opening to close the distance between him and the scribe. "You're not rewriting anything today," Casper growled, raising his ghost trap. The scribe's shadowy figure flickered, his skeletal hand clutching the quill tighter. "Foolish mortal. Do you think you can stop what has already begun?" Before Casper could respond, the scribe slashed the quill through the air, creating a tear in the fabric of reality. Through the tear, glimpses of a twisted, otherworldly dimension spilled forth impossible landscapes and ghostly figures writhing in agony. Ellie stared, wide-eyed. "Casper, what is that?" Casper gritted his teeth. "That," he said grimly, "is what we're trying to stop." The scribe turned his hollow gaze toward Ellie, his voice dripping with cold amusement. "You, with your crude contraptions, daring to tamper with powers far beyond your reach." Ellie stood her ground, despite the trembling in her knees. "Yeah, well, at least I'm trying to do something about it." Casper took advantage of the distraction, activating his ghost trap and throwing it toward the scribe. The trap emitted a blinding light, but the scribe merely raised the quill, deflecting its power with a wave of his hand. Casper and the scribe faced off in the center of the church, the tear in reality crackling ominously behind them. Ellie worked furiously on recalibrating the spectral scrambler, while Vic continued to create as much chaos as possible, inhabiting and flinging objects at the surrounding ghosts. "Ellie, we need to shut that tear now," Casper called out, narrowly avoiding another tendril of ghostly energy. "I'm on it," Ellie shouted back, her fingers flying over the controls. But this thing wasn't exactly designed for interdimensional rifts. The scribe raised his quill once more, preparing to unleash another wave of destruction. Casper braced himself, determination etched on his face. The screen fades to black, just as Ellie's device emits a second pulse, its light engulfing the church. The pulse from Ellie's spectral scrambler lit up the church like a lightning strike, scattering the vortex of ghosts. The Grey Scribe recoiled slightly, his skeletal hand clutching the glowing quill with even more intensity. Casper seized the chance, lunging toward him, his ghost trap primed and glowing faintly. "You think you can unmake what has been written?" The scribe sneered, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You are but a speck against the tides of eternity." Casper smirked, his eyes narrowing as he leveled the ghost trap at the scribe. "Yeah, well, sometimes a speck is all it takes." The trap emitted a powerful beam of light, aimed directly at the scribe's chest. For a moment, the light connected, and the room trembled. But the scribe raised the quill, its glow intensifying as he countered the trap's power with his own. Ellie, still crouched behind the pews, watched the confrontation with wide eyes. Her device had bought them a sliver of time, but it wasn't enough. She needed to do more. "Vic," she called out, her voice shaky but determined. The poltergeist shimmered into view, his spectral form barely visible in the chaos. "What's the plan, genius? Can you possess that quill? Just for a few seconds?" Vic hesitated, his usually cocky demeanor faltering. "You're kidding, right? That thing's glowing with more bad vibes than a haunted disco ball. Do you trust me or not?" Ellie snapped, her hands moving rapidly across the scrambler's controls. Vic sighed dramatically. "Fine, but if I implode, I'm haunting you forever." Before Ellie could respond, Vic darted toward the scribe, his ghostly form weaving through the vortex of energy. Casper caught the movement out of the corner of his eye, his jaw tightening. "Ellie, what are you doing?" "Buying you time," she shouted back. Vic reached the quill, his shimmering form intertwining with the glowing artifact. The scribe snarled, momentarily distracted as Vic's essence disrupted the quill's power. The vortex flickered, its hold weakening. Casper took the opening, advancing toward the scribe. Ellie worked furiously on her device, recalibrating it for one final pulse. "Vic, hang in there," Ellie shouted, her voice breaking. Vic's spectral voice echoed faintly. "No promises, kid. This is not comfy." The quill's glow dimmed, and the scribe staggered, his form flickering like a fading hologram. Casper didn't hesitate. He activated the ghost trap, its beam locking onto the scribe. Ellie's device emitted a final, powerful pulse, sending a wave of energy rippling through the church. The tier in reality crackled and began to close, its edges folding in on themselves like a collapsing star. The scribe let out a bone-chilling scream as the trap's beam pulled him in. His form twisted and contorted before vanishing into the light, leaving only the quill behind, now dim and lifeless. The church fell silent, the oppressive energy lifting like a dissipating storm. Casper exhaled heavily, lowering the ghost trap. Ellie slumped against the pew, her hands trembling but victorious. Vic's voice, faint but familiar, drifted toward them. "Did we win? Or am I in some ghost purgatory?" Casper smirked, glancing at the quill on the ground. "We won. For now." Outside the church, the first hints of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a soft glow on the crumbling structure. Casper and Ellie leaned against the truck, exhaustion etched on their faces. "So," Ellie said, breaking the silence, "what happens to the quill?" Casper held the artifact in his hands, studying it carefully. "We keep it safe, locked away where no one can use it." Ellie nodded, her gaze shifting to the horizon. "Think there'll be more scribes out there?" Casper's smirk returned, faint but certain. "There's always more. That's the job." Vic's voice chimed in from the radio, his usual sarcasm intact. "Great. Can't wait to see what fresh horrors you drag us into next." Ellie laughed softly, despite the tension. "Guess we'll be ready for them." Casper's smirk softened into something close to a smile as the trio prepared to head back to Wrenwood, their bond stronger than ever and their adventures far from over.